Wesley Taylor says, "The world's greatest fundamentalists are fishermen and golfers." A fellow had been away fishing all day and had no luck. Not wanting to go home skunked, he stopped off at the local fish shop and asked the storekeeper to pick up 3 of the largest trout he had. "Shall I wrap them up for you?" asked the shopkeeper. "No," replied the fisherman. "I'll stand here by the door, and you can throw them to me from behind the counter." "Why in the world do you want me to throw them to you?" asked the shopkeeper. "Well," said the fisherman, "I've been fishing all day and I haven't caught a thing. Now, I may not be a good fisherman, but I'm an even worse liar. And when I get home, my wife and kids are going to ask me if I caught anything, and I want to be able to tell them the truth." We are all fundamentalists about something. Jesus was a love fundamentalist. Many of us are fundamentalists about fundamentalism. We are either fundamentally against it or for it. But contrary to what some of us may think, fundamentalism isn't the private domain of one group of people. Fundamentalists come in all shapes and sizes from all walks of life. The jogger going out at 5:30 a.m. on a dark, blustery, blizzardy morning is a fundamentalist about her exercise regime. The carpenter whose workshop looks like a display ad is a fundamentalist about the location of each and every one of his tools. The 6-year-old who asks his parents to pick off those tiny dehydrated onions from the Happy Meal burger is a fundamentalist about his food. The office manager whose weekly staff meeting always takes exactly the same form, no matter what crisis is surging through the office, or who insists that everything takes place according to plan, according to Robert's Rules of Order, is a procedural fundamentalist. The strict party liners who would not vote for anyone other than their candidate from their political party is a political fundamentalist. And the parents of children who will only let their children be instructed in the 3 R's may be called educational fundamentalists. And there are countless others as well. Monday Night Football fundamentalists. The toilet paper rolls over the top or under. No nuts and fudge. Christmas presents open on Christmas Eve, on Christmas Day. White shoes or clothes only certain times of the year fundamentalists. Even within the defined domain of religious fundamentalism, there are many varieties. Take us, for example. For some of us, summer is a challenging time because we have organ, praise band, sanctuary, Weisenheimer Hall, order of worship, New Revised Standard Version fundamentalists. All of us are fundamentalists about something. We all choose to erect certain foundational pillars that we use to support the weight of our attitudes and actions called for in our lives. Being a fundamentalist about some things can actually be good. It can strengthen our centeredness and build up our sense of security for the marginality that is required of a disciple of Jesus. Fundamentalism becomes a problem when those rocks of certainty we have placed in our lives harden to immovability and hinder the compassionate love of our hearts. Mark's Gospel pinpoints this problem in the 2nd episode of today's text that you'll hear in a little bit. Even as Jesus is moved to compassion by the sight of a man with a withered hand, Jesus was deeply saddened by their hard hearts. Jesus and the bystanders in the synagogue, that they were butting head-on into each other's fundamentalism. For the Pharisees, abiding by the strict letter of the law concerning correct Sabbath observations was the fundamentalism shaping their attitude. Like the Pharisees from the 1st episode of today's text, the synagogue observers believed that safeguarding Sabbath observation was more important than the individual situation that they found themselves addressing. In both cases, however, Jesus acts as a fundamentalist. But here, as in everywhere else in the gospel stories, Jesus' actions and attitudes are defined by his fundamentalism of love. In everything Jesus did, in everything he said, Jesus acted out this love fundamentalism. It was love fundamentalism that urged Jesus to heal the man's withered hand on the Sabbath, that kept Jesus from temptation in the wilderness and spurred Jesus to sweep the children up in his arms. It was love fundamentalism that drove Jesus to choose service over political power, and that revealed Jesus' glorification through self-sacrifice. It was love fundamentalism that moved Jesus to accept dinner invitations with all sorts of outcasts and forgive all people. Douglas John Paul says that the law requires us to tolerate one another. But the law of Christ makes tolerance not nearly enough. It may be good enough legally and politically for the pluralistic society, but it is not good enough for Jesus, who did not say, tolerate your neighbor, rather, love your neighbor. The great thing about being a love fundamentalist is that the more strictly you abide by your fundamentalism, the greater freedom you have. Instead of narrowing your vision, limiting your options, or scaling down your scope, love fundamentalism opens up whole new worlds of possibilities and promise. The fundamentalism of love always offers one more chance, always goes one more mile, always trusts one more time, always believes one more possibility, always commits one more hour, always cries one more tear, always rejoices over one more soul. But like all fundamentalism, love fundamentalism depends on rigorous commitment, perpetual practice, and overarching obedience in order for it to truly define your life. If love is not woven within every fiber of your being, then love is not a fundamental part of your life. Jesus chose to weave the thread of love throughout every aspect of his existence. The very fiber of his soul was knit together with love. Will we choose to do the same?
Mark 2:23-36. One Sabbath day, as Jesus was walking through some grain fields, his disciples began breaking off heads of grain to eat. But the Pharisees said to Jesus, "Look, why are they breaking the law by harvesting grain on the Sabbath?" Jesus said to them, "Haven't you ever read in the Scriptures what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He went into the house of God during the days when Abiathar was high priest, and broke the law by eating the sacred loaves of bread that only the priests were allowed to eat. He also gave some to his companions." Then Jesus said to him, "The Sabbath was made to meet the needs of people, and not people to meet the requirements of the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord, even over Sabbath." Jesus went into the synagogue again, and noticed a man with a deformed hand. Since it was the Sabbath, Jesus' enemies watched him closely. If he healed the man's hand, they planned to accuse him of working on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the deformed hand, "Come and stand in front of everyone." Then he turned to his critics and asked, "Does the law permit good deeds on the Sabbath, or is it a day for doing evil? Is this a day to save life or to destroy it?" But they wouldn't answer him. Jesus looked around at them angrily and was deeply saddened by their hard hearts. Then he said to the man, "Hold out your hand." So the man held out his hand, and it was restored. At once the Pharisees went away and met with the supporters of Herod to plot how to kill Jesus.
Jesus did not question the sacredness of the Sabbath or reject these inherent laws, but rather brought them to fulfillment. When the law promotes love of God and love of everyone, Jesus encouraged their observance. But when these same laws intruded on loving God and others, Jesus denounced them. People and their needs are much, much more important to God than rules and laws. Whenever a rule develops a life of its own, developing people, then that rule needs to be returned to its true purpose, which is to grow love. Hear that one more time again. Whenever a rule or a law develops a life of its own, we could add policy in there as well, that divides people, then the rule needs to be returned to its true purpose, which is to grow love. Jesus was saddened by their hard hearts. How is your heart hard? God created us to have preferences, to enjoy different facets of creation. However, we are never to judge, to look down upon, or criticize someone who enjoys a different facet. Broccoli lovers are to love beet lovers. Nature lovers are to love video game lovers. Metallica lovers are to love Blake Shelton lovers. Sanctuary lovers are to love Meisenheimer Hall lovers. Hymn lovers are to love praise song lovers. And Viking lovers are to love Packer lovers. How is your heart hard? Are there certain people that get under your skin? If you are a highly organized, efficient person with something to do right after shopping, is it that person ahead of you that is searching for these coupons and then can't find their credit card and then slowly bagging their groceries? If you drive a Prius, then perhaps it's the Hummer who cuts you off. If you are a Republican, then perhaps it's a Democrat or vice versa. Grow your love for them. How is your heart hard? Is there a person who has hurt you that you have not been able to forgive yet? Is there a person who lives a different lifestyle that you struggle to love? Is there a rule, a moral, or ethic that you believe all people should live, and when someone doesn't live it like you want them to, then your heart becomes hard, judgmental, and you disapprove of them? Alan Finkel said, "What is there that makes Christians feel that hate can express the love of Jesus?" We need to be careful that our preference for a certain way of life does not create hate for other ways of life. Be a love fundamentalist. Love all people. Show your love by listening, laughing, eating with everyone. Alan Finkel also said, "I think of myself as a fundamentalist. That is, someone who still cares about fundamental things like truth, friends, imagination, story, honor, compassion, and love." Bill Wilson said the days of religious rhetoric are over. People have to see the reality of the gospel, and we are the only Jesus they will see, folks. Bobby Conway says, "You are the fifth gospel." How is our culture's heart hard? Does our culture value some people more than others? Perhaps professional athletes, actors, the rich, married people with 2 children, people with a certain body mass index? How will we love all people? How will we confront biases with love that will encourage everyone to love everyone? How is our political heart hard? Are we treating all races equal? Do we care equally for the poor, the middle class, and the rich? Are we welcoming immigrants, just as we would welcome a fellow citizen? Do we show preferences to certain lifestyles or identities? Are we truly giving equal education, equal access to education, employment, housing, and health care to all? Do we honor and respect people in our country as much as we honor and respect people from other countries? Or do we give preference to certain people who live a certain way, believe certain things, and fit a certain template? How will we, as a person, as a church, as a country, love everyone fully and equally? David Verhoff said, "The Gospels are full of stories where Jesus ignores the boundaries imposed by acceptable religious, political, and social practice and openly disregards human-made laws and regulations in order to show compassion." Jesus consistently lets sinners and outcasts know that they are wanted and loved by God, even if they are despised by everyone else. Be a love fundamentalist. Strive to have every one of your thoughts about yourself and every person be a loving thought. And the moment a negative or biased, judgmental, fearful, hateful thought enters your mind, acknowledge that thought. Then visualize placing it aside. Perhaps visualize handing it to Jesus. And then immediately replace that thought with a loving thought. And then there's one more step you have to do. Then you have to reinforce that loving thought with a loving action for that person that negative thought entered your mind about. Strive to be more like Jesus, the ultimate love fundamentalist. Amen.